let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the webinar. We are very excited to be talking today about retention and engagement for Gen Z and the multi-generational workplace, specifically looking at learning and development. Great. The chat is now live. This will be recorded. It will be sent. If you attended, if you didn't attend, everyone will get the recording. And this is actually a follow-up or continuation. We had an opening conversation about this back in October, and it was just amazing. We had so many questions, so much engagement, so many people talking, and there was a call for we need to talk about this more. So here we are, we're back. If you're joining us for the second time, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We will be talking about different things. If you didn't catch the first one, we'll go ahead and put out the link and you can watch that on demand after, or, if you don't want to hear our voices for 2 hours straight today, wait until next week and catch it up, while you're catching up with your emails on Monday morning. So quickly, we'll go around and do introductions. My name is Rachel Schoenwald. I'm a senior marketing campaigns manager at HiBob, which is an HR platform for modern, mid-size, multinational companies. I do marketing, but I really like to think of myself as an HR cheerleader and advocate. I've learned so much, both, in theory, but also from Alex, one of our amazing HR people partners, and our entire team, and all of the customers and people at conferences I've learned from. And I just want to help HR be successful because I don't think enough people are doing that. And it's really hard. My pronouns are she, her, and I am based in Austin, Texas. So I will pass it over to Alex. Go ahead and do your name, your pronouns, where you are, and a fun fact about you, or,
Thank
what you want
you,
people to know.
Rachel. Sure. My pronouns are she, her. I am based in London in the UK. I am really enjoying these comments in the chat roll in. This is such a global bunch. I'm obsessed with that. Like Rachel said, I am one of the people and culture partners at HiBob. So I'm based in the UK, but I work across our Europe teams and with our global people team. I am almost 7 years at HiBob now. It's my anniversary in a month. So I have seen the company grow and change over time. I guess I am also on this panel with a smidgen of, am I Gen Z? I'm potentially bringing that flavor. I won't fully claim it. I'm pretty sure I'm on the cusp. But maybe there's a little bit of that in how I see the world and the world of HR as well. But I'm super glad to be back for round 2 of this with you both.
Thank you. Kathi, go ahead.
Amazing. Kathi Endreres. I'm Senior Vice President of Research and Global Industry Analyst at the Josh Bersin Company. If you don't know us, we are a research and advisory company for HR specifically. I live in Palo Alto, California, but I'm originally from Austria, and I've also lived in London and in Spain, and now for quite some time I've been living here in California. A little bit about my background. I've been in HR both as a consultant and then as a practitioner for over 25 years. So quite some time. I've seen a lot of change in the HR profession. But what I haven't seen change is how dedicated everybody is to employees and creating a great work environment and creating great organizations. And that's why I'm so passionate about HR and helping every employee be the best they can be while also helping organizations thrive. So very excited about this second time. I was very taken aback last time too, about positively taken aback by the engagement of everybody, and everybody was putting so many comments and so many chats in. And so I'm looking forward to that too. Well, should I have a fun fact? I don't know. I don't remember what I shared last time. I think I shared, it was maybe a little bit of a humble brag. Maybe I'll share the same thing again, that I'm an obsessive marathon runner. I think I might have shared that last time. I can't remember, but I'm obsessively marathon running. I've run 41 marathons. And so a day is not good if I can't not run a marathon every day, obviously, but can't go for a run. So, and I have my next one coming up in February.
So is that marathon, or the one after that, your marathon of marathons?
Marathon of
Yeah,
marathons.
42, the 42nd one.
42nd. Yeah, exactly. It's the marathon of
Wow.
marathons. I love that.
I feel like you need like the sticker, you know, the 42.1 or 42.26,
44.2. Yeah, then I have
and then
to run
another one.
one. I know.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for coming in the chat, letting us know where you are. It looks like we are from Bangladesh to South Dakota and California and all over the world. And that is just incredible. Like, I love this. So exciting. So yes, feel free to put comments in the chat and, you know, have conversations about what we're talking about, throw out your opinion. If you have a question that you want us to discuss or someone to answer, throw that in the Q&A tab. We'll keep an eye on both. We'll save time for questions at the end, but if we have questions coming in kind of as it's topical, we'll go ahead and try to weave that in also. We did it last time. It seemed to work really well. And we just love, you know, to have this bigger conversation with so many people and with, you know, all that real world experience, obviously. So like I said, this will be recorded, and let's get started. So if I can find my notes. Here we go. So for our first question, one other thing, just to recap quickly, kind of from the last webinar, we at HiBob have been participating and running different surveys for Gen Z in the workplace globally. So we run it all over Europe, in Australia, in the United States, and we found some very insightful finds from that survey. A few of them that we discussed last time were about Gen Z's desire for engagement, and that can be defined very broadly. But you know, when we're digging down into the specific, it's about, you know, they want the flexibility of work from home, but they also enjoy the in-person gathering in an office or at an event. But they want these things to be meaningful, right? They want meaningful engagement. They're not going to show up to the office just because somebody says so. But when there's a reason for them to be there or they're learning something, they're much more engaged. Another thing that we talked about was kind of the multi-generational workforce and how you need to be able to address the different needs of the different groups, you know, be it by age, by skill, but also some of these things are kind of the same. Everyone needs to learn about AI and how does it impact their job. But we talked about the ability for tech and for AI even to help better personalize these journeys and these opportunities for people. The other thing that we discussed a lot about is Gen Z is, you know, they have the reputation, whatever your perception is of it, but ultimately, they're also people that are just new to the workplace. And if you think back, whether that was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or 30 years ago, when you first entered the workplace, it was also hard. There's also a learning curve. If you're in university, you're not learning about office skills necessarily, or you're not directly learning about them. I would say that a group project is probably the biggest learning that's most applicable to working in an office. But, you know, just kind of having those guideposts and the ability to teach them so they can be more successful. They want more from companies than we've seen from other generations in the past. And I think from an HR perspective, you know, if you're people first, it really aligns with, you know, how we think and how we at HiBob think about HR and people management and talent management. If you want to see the whole thing, like that was 5 minutes and we definitely covered a lot more, go ahead and click in and sign up for that on demand and you'll get the link and be able to watch the whole thing. Let's go ahead and dive into the first question. So just kind of overall, you know, the title of the webinar, how are we going to, or what's the best way to align development programs with these Gen Z values in order to create better engagement and therefore better retention? And, you know, when we're thinking about these things, we can think about, you know, career pathing or practical life skills or those kinds of things. Kathi, do you want to start us off?
Oh, sure. Well, I think now is actually a great time to do all of this because now we have actually the tools to do this much more easily. And I'm sometimes going back on like how HR used to be, and in some organizations probably still is, and learning and development specifically used to be very hard to do tailored, personalized kind of career pathways, personalized experiences, because when you wanted to create learning programs or learning opportunities, you had to do it all by hand, right? Somebody had to sit and craft a course or craft a like an engagement or like an in-person course, or then later on an e-learning course. And it was very cumbersome, of course. And so it was not for lack of trying. I think that everything was one size fits all, right? Because you only had one shot of doing this. And so you had to say, well, I'm going to build, I have to build this towards the lowest common denominator, or towards some kind of persona where we think this is what they need. Well, all of this has changed now, because today it's actually very easy with tools like HiBob. I know HiBob has one of them, and others too, to personalize learning to the needs of your Gen Z workforce. So what that looks like, it could be that there's very different career pathways, for example, or career programs for your Gen Z workforce than for maybe your, I saw that somebody's in here from silent generation, which is great, right? Very different career pathways, of course, because the Gen Z workforce is just starting out. As you said, Rachel, they're just learning about what it even means to be in the workplace. I have two Gen Z daughters at home. They're a little bit younger. They haven't started working yet. They're 13 and 15, but they're thinking about how they're going to start working. And I guarantee you, they're going to have a lot of needs on what organizations need to provide for them, versus somebody who has been in the workforce for 30 years, of course, has very different needs. And now we can actually personalize things. And how to personalize that is much easier now. So tools today can actually allow you to say, for example, if I'm a Gen Z worker and maybe I want just a 3-minute video, and we talked about this last time too, attention spans in lots of the Gen Zs, it's kind of short, right? Nobody's going to sit. I mean, we thought early on, like maybe 15 years ago, we thought a 1-hour video is perfectly fine. Well, now Gen Z, I guarantee you, right? They're not going to sit through a 1-hour video. They might sit through a 5 or 10 5-minute videos. It's like staggered up over time, right? Here's a little one, here's a little one. Well, with these new tools, you can actually do that quite easily and cover the same content in the way that people want to do this. So very powerful to use technology, use AI for this with the same kind of content, tailoring it to the needs of your audience. So that's one thing that we can do. Basically, using technology is very powerful, and I think most organizations are starting to scratch the surface here.
Great, thank you. Alex, anything to add, or anything that's been discussed, in our HR leadership calls?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were thinking about how we actually align these to the way that Gen Z employees are likely to engage, and we care about retaining them in our companies, right? I think there has to be a bit of a balance there for us as organizations, thinking about what is it that we're trying to achieve. This is big picture for a second, but what are we trying to achieve? What are our goals as an organization? Where are we aiming for? Where do we want to be as a company? And also, what do our Gen Z employees, or employees in general, but particularly the Gen Z ones, what are they responding to? What do they care about? What's going to make them feel more engaged in the company? What's going to keep them retained in our organizations? And finding a bit of a match between the two of those. I think if we create them in isolation, then maybe they're not necessarily serving each other. I think we need to be thinking about how to understand both better. And to what Kathi was saying about the way that we build and deliver this content or trainings and the structure of it, I think particularly when it comes to Gen Z, the way that we are delivering these kind of trainings or learning opportunities, or the way that people are consuming this information, definitely is shifting. We're moving. We've moved beyond these kind of traditional formats of learning, and thinking about the way that people are actually engaging with that data, or content or courses or whatever it might be. I definitely think there's much more of a shift now to thinking about how people can really learn in the flow of the work that they're doing. So not like a structured program or a sit-down course where you need to go and be off-site. Like, these things are great and there's a lot of reason and merit for them. I'm sure we'll keep talking about it, but also thinking about, like, how can we make sure that people are finding opportunities to be learning all the time, like learning in the job that you're doing now, learning with a view for the role you want to be doing in the future or where you see yourself. How can we create these smaller opportunities in the day-to-day as well as the bigger, chunkier, heftier things that we're trying to deliver?
Yeah, I think it goes back to there's like different formats of learning. You have the micro learning, you have the learning in the flow of work, which is knowledge management even, right? In a way, we're always learning, right? I mean, we're learning something right now. So through the questions that people have and the comments that they have, and hopefully the audience also learns something. So I think it goes back to like, what are the different learning formats that we need and that are appropriate? Because some things you're probably have to learn, and you do have to learn maybe in a more in-person thing, right? When you practice soft skills, when you practice communication, well, just watching a little video won't work, right? So, but now we have a much easier time, I think, to bucket these out and format them out in the way that people want to consume that.
Great. Thank you both. You know, we got a question in the chat about what tools would you use to concise an hour video into a 10-minute video. And I think that, you know, just kind of addressing that, it also depends on what's the content, right? Is that an internal training? Is that an external training? So if you're using like an LXB, or if you're using, you know, any kind of content library, then obviously you don't have a lot of control over that and you want to start looking for content that fits that. But, you know, let's say that that's an internal training. The first thing that I would do, and I'd love to hear from both of you if you have other ideas, is, you know, take that outline, take the curriculum that you probably have written down, even if it's a video, and I would first outline the objectives, make sure you're very clear on what you want them to learn and how you want them to learn it. And then I'd actually put the whole thing into ChatGPT and say, in the prompts in ChatGPT, engineering these prompts, you hear that on social media, you probably saw it on TikTok, on Instagram, but it really, really does make all the difference of the response that you get, and being very specific in what you want ChatGPT to do. So you want to say, given these objectives and given this, you know, data and information, how would you break it down so no section is more than 10 minutes long or more than 15 minutes long? And then you can take that 1 hour course and break it into milestones. Now, if that 1 hour is part of like a much bigger thing, then maybe it should be a little bit longer, or maybe you put natural breaks in that 1 hour video. So you can say, you know, tell them, go stand up, get a drink of water. Did you drink enough water today? You know, is your Stanley Cup full? And just, you know, teach them on how to take it, because I mean, I've met one employee, one of my coworkers, who was like, I actually had time today, so I started doing an L&D course. No one's going to make time for it. Kathi or Alex, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. If you don't have any dedicated tools, there's now many dedicated tools out there that actually do that, a little bit more specialized than ChatGPT does. I know HiBob has something coming up that will help you with that too. Like basically uploading, you could upload the source document and specify into those tools. There's Aries, Sana, Docebo has one. HiBob, I know you're building that too, so that's going to come up very soon as well, where you can pretty much just upload a document. We've done this actually in our own with our own library a lot of times. So we have a document. Let's say, for example, we have our predictions of what's coming next in 2025. It's one of our most popular assets, where everybody is reading about what we see coming in the next year. And last year, for the first time, we didn't just have this big PDF that people could read, but we created through a tool called Aries, a mobile course. Basically, you just upload it into that tool, and then basically you give it the specification on how long the learning segment should be. And we said these should be 5-minute learning segments. And every day, basically, you get then a ping on your phone if you subscribe to that, with a little bit of content, a little bit of video, and then a knowledge check, basically. And it goes for like a week or 2 weeks or whatever you specify. And basically, you could just upload basically the content, the knowledge base, and specify, I want 5-10 minute videos plus knowledge checks. And I want this as a mobile course, or I want this as a video based, or I want this as a podcast. Others go even further and say, and other tools go even further and say the learner can specify, do they want to consume it as a podcast? Do they want to consume it as a video? Do you want to read it? Because everybody learns differently. So those tools are actually very, very powerful, and they're being created as we speak, more and more coming into the market, which speeds up, doesn't just speed up the time to create content from a L&D perspective, but then also it personalizes things and it makes the learner experience much better. And I know Gen Z obviously has different requirements for learning, as everybody else has, but every Gen Z person also doesn't learn the same, right? Some people are visual learners, some people like to listen to it, some people like to read it, some people like to write something. So that personalization is really key.
Yeah, I think these kind of tools as well, where you have a bit more choice and flexibility in the way that things are delivered. They're not just tools to address Gen Z in the workplace because of how they, take in information or want to learn, but I think those are excellent tools as well for multi-generational workplaces, where actually if you're trying to, hit multiple learning styles or generations in the organization, giving people the choice to see, like, do I want to read through a PDF because that works for me, or do I need these kind of micro learnings throughout my week? I think there's probably a bit of re-envisioning how these are actually being built and how they can be. You don't necessarily just have to have the long old document to read through. It maybe works for some people, but actually kind of reimagining, like, does this need to be digested all in one go, or actually could this be little chunks of knowledge and checks, like you said as well? So I think that's quite a good strategy for tackling the complexities of multi-generational or different styles.
And I think, Kathi, like you said, there's technology out there already. You can hack it with ChatGPT, which is more or less free, though, an enterprise, like a business license, is $20 a month. And, if you're planning, you've probably already finished your 2025 budget, but when you're looking at your 2026 budget, you've got to start putting money in for AI, for yourself, for HR. This is a great use case for it. And then if you need to kind of prove the business case, using ChatGPT, using a hack, and testing the original learning content versus your new engagement completion rates, that's the best way to make the business case. Plus, don't forget how much time you're going to save, and how much that is going to help the business.
Yeah,
Rachel,
time savings. Go ahead.
Definitely. I was just going to say, I think while we're on the topic of AI, let's keep it going. I'm not sure if AI came up last time, and I think we surprised ourselves in that. But it's definitely so relevant for this topic. I think one of the things that we really saw came out of the report when we're looking into Gen Z, and some of the questions around that were like, how do they feel about AI? What are they anticipating with AI? And actually, the reports and the data from that was really showing that Gen Z as a wider generation in the workplace aren't feeling apprehensive or threatened in any way by AI. Actually, they're the generation that really see it as an opportunity to help me do what I do, help me save time, help me do things more efficiently, help me, take lots of things, or and read lots of data differently than I have been doing, or whatever it might be. So actually, I think we have to be thinking about, where does AI show up in all of the roles that we're doing? Where can we use it to our advantage to do what we do differently or better? And actually, the Gen Z employees amongst us in organizations are probably the ones that are happy to help champion a lot of that. I think Rachel, we were chatting the other day about we've just run an AI day at HiBob, getting everybody interacting with AI in some way. It was like a company-wide jam-packed day of all these different AI initiatives, and thinking, like, what does it mean? How can we interact with that in our day-to-day and everything? And at each kind of level, whether you've never interacted with it before and it feels a bit scary to the people who have been using it for months and like testing things out, but actually there was some really great feedback around that. But off of the back of it, we've already seen a bunch of our team at HiBob who are already thinking of really interesting ways that they can use it in their role. So actually, if you're interested in thinking about how it might help or what to do with it, ask your Gen Z employees, ask the ones who are using it and interested in doing that, or like feel confident with it. So I think it's a good tool to be listening to them and hearing their examples.
I totally agree. I think it's a huge opportunity actually for everybody in the organization to learn and experiment with AI, and kind of you can. Yeah, I mean, one example I have from our company, we have our own generative AI tool. We call it Galileo, and it's an AI assistant for, yeah, it's great. And we used to talk about it like it, and now we talk about him more and more so, because it feels like Galileo is part of the team. And we give it to clients too, and kind of everybody can subscribe to it. We have like 10,000 people using it already, and it's great. And when we looked at who is using it most, it was really interesting, because the person that was using it most from our team basically is an employee who is a Gen Z employee herself. So she is using it constantly. We can see like usage statistics. But the person that uses it second most is Josh Bersin, who is our CEO, and he's a baby boomer, right? So sometimes and then the third person is actually me, and I'm Gen X. So I think it goes to show that yes, Gen Z can lead, but then there's others that are also doing this.
Yeah.
I think the demystifying, using like helping other generations to demystify AI, and using the kind of reverse mentoring or connections with Gen Z employees, with others in the organizations, is a huge opportunity, because I think you saw this in the research, and we see this also when we work with Gen Z employees, and also I see this with my kids too. When I remember when generative AI came around, I was like, oh, did you see what it can do? I'm like, oh no, I mean, like, this is going to change everything. And my daughters were totally unimpressed. They're like, yeah, of course you can do this. Why wouldn't it be able to do this? Yeah, of course. Like, and they were like, and totally for them it was. And then of course the next day they started using it for homework, and they started using it for like planning a trip and planning a birthday party and whatever, right? They used it for everything right away. And I think for those of us that are not like obviously that close to it, or that have seen many other generations of technologies, we're like wrapping our head around how can we actually use it. It's going to be much more natural for I think the Gen Z employees. And so I think creating these kind of reverse mentoring programs with older generations, more experienced people with Gen Z, it's going to be a huge opportunity, because that way not only can the older generations learn from Gen Z, but then Gen Z is also going to learn how the older generation thinks about business and about maybe other topics that are not technology related. So it's going to be this great opportunity.
And I think that's a great point, Kathi, also, because it's not just, I mean, I think that businesses should listen to Gen Z, do work to accommodate them, just like they should any employee. And I think a lot of the things that Gen Z are asking for, actually other generations will benefit from. But it's a two-way road. Gen Z also, this comes back to, they're new in the workplace. They have opinions. That's fine. That's totally great. But we all need to learn to work with each other. And you see the same thing across every single generational divide. And honestly, we can apply this to departments, to sites, if you're global. It's always this way. Some, working with Germans or Europeans have a specific stereotype, or, just understanding what the working environment is like, what the expectations are. Alex actually took us on an amazing program about culture mapping, and the different ways that those things need to work together. It's true for everything. And so, Kathi, I think that's a great idea, this reverse mentorship, this pairing, and bringing people together. I do want to move on to the next question, because I think this is going to be a big one. Managers. How do you train managers to be good managers in this situation? And that's, encouraging, like having them understand the importance of L&D, or how it can benefit them and their teams, how to get them bought in. What does the personalization look like for them? How does tech help them? What do we do about managers?
I mean, that's the age-old question. What do we do about managers?
What do we do with managers?
What do we do about managers? Well, I think a couple of things. Managers, of course, have always been so important in creating this great environment where people can be engaged and supported and develop and all of that. In today's workplace, while managers are still very important, there's, I think, a shift in most organizations from just line managers, organizational, like functional managers, to project managers, team managers, because more and more people don't just work with their manager, with their like people manager in the hierarchy, but they work on cross-functional projects all the time. So what we've seen important for organizations to create that kind of organizational dynamism where people are more supported, not just by their line managers, but by team managers, project managers, and by their peers, is enabling everybody, including managers, to give feedback, receive feedback, make sure that we're setting up this environment where people can learn from mistakes. I think the learning from mistakes is really, really key. But many organizations still have this, well, yeah, you can make a mistake, but we really can't because you're going to get punished, right? So we learn. We fail fast or something like that. But then once anybody fails and takes a risk, then we're going to punish them, and they're going to make sure that they're going to never take a risk again. So I think that kind of mindset shift to both say it's not just the line managers, it's kind of everybody in the organization that can be a leader, that can be a manager. So how can we enable all of them? And then I think critically important is how do you enable that culture, that learning from mistakes, the speaking up culture, the inclusive kind of environment where everybody is appreciated and can bring their best self to work. I think that's something that Gen Z is really looking for, and that we can enable through managers and everybody in the organization.
Yeah, definitely. I really think how we work with our leaders, how we train them, how we encourage them and empower them to interact with their teams, I really believe is such a game changer. And the tools that we give them to do that as well. I think helping them to understand these topics, and again, it kind of goes back to the balance of like, what is it that you need and are trying to do as a business, and what are your employees asking for, what are they craving? I think some of the things that really stand out for me, and leadership is, and I think always will be, a huge focus for us internally at Highbob with our own leaders and how we grow our teams, and also in the way that we build and design the platform to be able to support the managers of our customers as well. But I think giving them tools where they can have these kind of conversations with their teams, understand their teams better, understand what do they need, how to adapt my style and approach to work with different types of employees, and whether that's generational or not, I think it probably goes beyond that. But yeah, thinking about their styles, I actually think there's a lot of merit in setting up our managers to have more feedback conversations. I think some of the research we've seen for Gen Z employees is that they really want more feedback. They want more feedback, but they don't just want more feedback that's not delivered well. They want feedback that's, our managers know how to deliver in constructive environments, and recognizing them in the right way, noticing where there's opportunities for them to stretch and get involved in different things and help them develop and get involved in other kinds of projects. So I really think creating training and programs and championing our leaders to, I think the topics there really are, the themes are like their coaching skills, their feedback skills, creating these environments to enable their employees to learn new skills are really going to be some of the focus areas. I actually just saw, it was super timely, but someone from our team, the perks of being a HR member of the team in Highbob is we get to see and share a lot of the content and things that people are looking at. But yeah, someone from the team just shared before this a Gartner report of what's coming up and what people are thinking about for 2025, and leadership and managers was top of the list. So I think it's always a topic, and actually our managers have so much influence and responsibility in our team's experience that we as HR, I think, need to create the structures and foundations for them. So
So let's
Yeah.
like dig into that. What kind of tactics would you use and how do you get the manager's buy-in on it, right? Because if you have a manager that's kind of been through this training or has seen how it can be done well, it's not as hard. But if they haven't had positive experiences before, how do you create that buy-in and how do you set up those feedback loops for them? How do you make sure that it's going well other than just, training and offsites?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a good question. I think maybe an example while I guess, yeah, process and think about it. We actually ran a training a couple of weeks ago. It's really fresh of mind now that you've asked, but we ran, I won't call it training, I'll say workshop. We've rebranded to workshops. But we in HiBob internally, we run workshops and sessions for our new managers, like new or developing. So anyone who's joined us as a new manager or has been promoted to a first-time manager, they go through a few days, like some prep, and then a few days of training together. And we look at some of these like foundational topics like feedback and coaching and things like this. And actually, it was really an interesting. After a couple of days together, this was actually some of the like not feedback, but actually some of the responses we got right at the end of the training. We were asking them like, what did you come into these sessions thinking it was going to be like, and what are you taking away from it? And actually a few of the responses were like, I've done these trainings before, I didn't have super high hopes, I kind of thought I would just be out of the office for 2 days, but actually they were leaving thinking, I have really got to revisit some of these skills that I thought I knew and have kind of refreshed on. I'm leaving with a better community of leaders. I kind of felt like I was alone in my job before, and actually I realized I've got a bunch of peers where they can bond and connect on, hey, I'm a people leader too. We do a different job at HiBob, but I'm a people leader. So I think really creating those kind of moments and encouraging them to have even more difficult conversations with their team, I think is really empowering.
I think one thing that's really important too is for organizations to establish what it means to be a leader at your company, because what it means to be a leader in your company is different than any other company, because your organization's mission is different, your vision is different, your purpose is different, and your work culture and your workforce is different. So organizations, I think, that establish that and really take the time to say, what does it mean to be a leader in our company? What does it mean to lead the company XYZ way? I just did a podcast actually with a senior professional, a senior director of leadership development for a healthcare organization, Sanford Health, and it's public, and you can all listen to that. And what she walked us through end to end their leadership development approach. And it was very powerful because the way that they really approached it. They said, first, everybody is a leader, and there's 3 components for them on leadership. They say you lead yourself, you lead your team, and then I thought she was going to say you lead the company or you lead the organization, but she said you lead the mission. And I thought that was so powerful because she said
that's nice.
You need to lead the mission. So because I thought, okay, person, like individual, team, and then I'm like, oh, you lead people, right? And then you're like, oh, you lead the company, but it wasn't about the company. It was really about the mission. And so she said, this is their way to embed the mission into everything that everybody is doing every single day. So it's not just words on a page or something like that. So she walked us through how they created then the leadership behaviors, the leadership framework, and how they make sure that people have also these communities that you talked about, Alex, that people come together. For example, the new manager cohort comes together across the organization, and they're a very large healthcare organization with like 45,000 people. And I asked her, well, is it just for managers? For example, nurse managers are very different to finance managers, right? If you think about like running, like leading a team of nurses is completely different than leading a team of financial analysts, right? The work setting is different, the everything. And so I thought maybe they have like the nurse managers together, the office-based people together. And she says, no, because what we accomplish as a mission is really bringing everybody together. And I think that kind of inclusive environment where you say everybody contributes something to the mission, and we can establish these connections that really make or break the company is very powerful. I think this is going to resonate also with Gen Z, going back to the Gen Z, very much so, because I know they want to, Gen Z really wants to do something meaningful for the work. I think everybody wants to do meaningful work, of course, but for when you're just starting out with your career, it's especially important, right? It feels so important because you're like, well, what am I doing with my life, with my career? I want to do something that really makes me feel good and aligns with my values. So I think bringing that mission into the leadership development and management development is key.
Yeah, I would echo that, Kathi. And I think it actually connects, Rachel, to what you were saying before about how do we think about getting our managers on board and bought in to all of this. I think if we're first doing the groundwork of what do we value what do we value in this organization? What do we value in our leaders? What does great look like as a leader? I think it sets then a really clear expectation of this is what great looks like as a leader. And this is this is what we expect of our leaders. You're leading the business, leading the mission, and we're expecting that you'll do that as a part of your role. So I think it helps to connect the dots of why this is important and the role that they play in it. I think then as well, there's also, this is kind of pinning the bigger picture. Why am I doing this, and what's my role as a leader? And then I think really making these kind of topics and conversations really accessible for managers. So building like, what does a great one-on-one look like? Where do you do that? How do you run those regularly? Are you having career conversations with your team? When was the last time you spoke about those things? Like, are those something that you do less frequently with your team because that's okay with them? Or actually, are there members of your team who really want skills and opportunities and regular conversations about these things? How are you getting together, meeting on those, leaning on other leaders to deal with the challenges that you face and things like that? So I think getting them bought in on their own mission as a leader, and then giving them the tools to be able to do these things with their team as well, and really like live it as a leader in your business.
One thing that we did at HiBob in the product, and we do it in the company as well, but in the Bob platform, we have a one-on-one module that we built out for exactly this reason. So HR can give those resources. There's some managers that are very experienced, that are very good at one-on-ones, that just, this is part of their rhythm. But there's a lot of new managers or not new managers that this isn't their strength. They don't have it down to an art. They need that push. They need that structure. And so being able to provide it to them, because in reality, when we're thinking about, this group of leaders and managers, while it's so easy to get pulled into and focus on, your top performers, in reality, you need to be spending most of your time on the people that have a lot more room for growth and a lot more opportunity, because, that's going to affect their team. That's going to affect your retention, and just making sure that they have all those tools. I do want to be mindful of time, and there's a few things that we said that we would cover in the webinar. So the next thing, which I think is going to address a couple of these questions that we got about how do you meet the high demands and often unrealistic expectations from Gen Z employees, especially in healthcare, which is tough, and also Gen Z's lack of work readiness. How do you communicate? One thing that we saw in our research with Gen Z is they want transparency. They want communication. They're asking for a lot of things. They probably know that they can't get all of it, but you don't get what you don't ask for. And so how do you and how do you convince others within your company to have this kind of transparency? And what should that look like, to build that trust? Kathi, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, trust, over and over again, we see in every topic that we studied, that trust and transparency is kind of the foundation for so many things, for culture, for inclusive environment, for business outcomes as well, for better employee experience. And trust, I always say, trust is a two-way street, right? If you don't trust your employees, they're not going to trust you back. And that takes many different forms, from how do you empower them with autonomy, for example, to make choices on how they work, where they work, what tools they use, or are you micromanaging them and dictating the like specific things that they do, or are you measuring them much more about the outcomes, right? So I think trust really starts from what expectations do you have for employees, and Gen Z specifically I think they have pretty high expectations of companies to give them autonomy, to give them flexibility, because they ask the questions, why couldn't we, right? Not, but well, because we've always been in an office and we've always had to come to a place of work. And they're saying, well, I would love to come to the workplace, for example, but if you don't trust me to do work when I'm not working here, I'm not going to trust you, because it's kind of a two-way streak. So that the signals I think that we send to employees create kind of that environment. I mean, in terms of transparency, I think it's an organizational call on how transparent you are. Transparency is generally better. The more transparent you can be, the better it's going to be. It's going to pay off all the time. But I know there's organizations that say we err on the side of being more conservative. We only tell news when they're actually ready to be told. Well, then you can be at least transparent on where you are in the process, right? Or when you will have news. Because, like, for example, let's say transparency, and I don't know, you're looking at a merger and acquisition, for example. Well, some organization might say, well, we only tell employees and the like managers overall, like broad-based, once we know exactly this is the deal, where we're going to go, and this is exactly what we're going to do, and this is when the deal is going to go through, and this is what's going to happen, and all of that. And that's fine. Others might say, well, we are a little bit more transparent to even say, well, we're investigating that. We're looking into that acquisition, for example, and we don't know yet if it's going to happen or when it's going to happen. And we would like your feedback too. So once you're a little bit more transparent, you can actually solicit the input and get people more engaged in it. We call this kind of getting employees more engaged in everything. Employee activation. You can activate the employee voice, which is, I think, a big demand for Gen Z specifically, to be much more part of all of these decisions. And because they don't have anything else to compare to, I think it's easier for people maybe who have been in the workplace longer to accept this is how it's always been done, right? Most things are behind closed bars, right? Closed doors. But Gen Z asked the question, why can't I be part of this decision? Why can't I be involved in this? Why wouldn't you listen to my feedback? Because I have something to share. So I think that's kind of a little bit of how you could like calibrate that. If you can't be transparent because the organization won't allow you, be at least transparent about the process, not about the actual thing.
Yeah, I do. I always think, I think we spoke about it, or I mentioned last time as well. I do sometimes wonder, I think, if there's a bit of a connection between particularly social media and like how we all interact, whether that's in or outside of work, and how our expectations of transparency, or Gen Z expectations of transparency. I think the way that we have access to information now is so different. Like, things are so available. I can go on Instagram or TikTok, whatever, and I can find out what's going on anywhere. It's so accessible and ready to me. So I do think that influences our expectations of like, well, why wouldn't I be able to know about these things? I do think from a company perspective, it's also so fine to set the expectation of like what you can and can't be transparent about. Maybe there's a bit of a blurred line in there. Like, being transparent doesn't mean sharing absolutely every minute detail that, like, that's not appropriate. I'm assuming that most of us on here are HR. That's not appropriate all the time. So I think finding that balance of like what you can be transparent about, and then being transparent about what you're not prepared to talk about because of confidentiality or sensitivity around whatever it might be. And I think there does need to be a trust there. I think working on the trust of like, we will share information up front with you. We want to do that as an organization, or hopefully we're trying to take steps to be more transparent, and making employees feel included. I think the intention behind that for Gen Z comes from wanting to feel invested and included and valued and listened to. So the need in general, I think, is coming from a good place of wanting to be more involved and heard. So, and the expectation
Absolutely.
is that it's reciprocal. Yeah, but I don't think there's a problem with balancing what that actually looks like in the day to day.
And I
No,
think,
I agree.
Kathi, I think your M&A example is spot on. And I can say, for HiBob, our CEO, for the past 3-4 years has been saying, like, we are looking at M&A. That is one of the reasons we're raising money. I just said that to, hundreds of people on this webinar. I didn't give anything away. You don't know anything. That's normal for
That's
any
right.
kind of scale up. But
That's right.
we don't share who we're doing due diligence with. Like, that's a secret again until the deal's signed for a very important
Yes.
reason. But
Yeah,
any employee at HiBob, when that is announced, shouldn't be surprised that there is another acquisition, right? Everyone should expect that because they were transparent
yeah,
about that. So, but I think for Gen Z, and again, this is going back to, so we had a question from Shannon, Gen Z's lack of work readiness. What can companies do to prepare for that? Talk to them about it after it's done. Do sessions on what does the DD process look like? They don't know, going through the financial documents and all the, different departments
yeah,
that need to work together. Teaching them about the business objectives and the business processes and why you can't share this information is going to be a whole lot more successful than saying, well, we just can't. It's private. It's
yeah,
sensitive. There's money on the line.
Yeah,
yeah.
and
I think
that's what I meant with like transparency about the process, not necessarily about the topic,
the
right? So,
details. Yeah,
yeah, the details. So you could be very transparent. This is how we look at M&As. This is how these are the kind of targets, not companies, but we're trying to build this kind of capability. We're trying to build a people analytics capability, a performance management, whatever it is, right? You could say we're trying to add this capability, another global payroll, whatever the topic is, rather than saying, well, we're looking at XYZ company to acquire. But then people say, oh, I understand. And then you can say, why are we looking at bringing in this capability as an acquisition rather than building it in-house, right? So you get into the,
yeah,
get them more in terms of understanding business overall, and it gets to their work readiness.
yeah,
Sometimes though the work readiness is maybe at a lower level, even at a more basic level. I mean, if you think about, and you mentioned that too, Alex, in the beginning, when people come into the workplace, they don't even know how to be on a Teams call, right? Or on a Zoom call, right? They don't know how that works. They don't know how do you use Slack? I mean, they will technically understand it, but what's appropriate to send on Slack, which versus what should you pick up the phone
yeah,
or something like that? Helping them with communication channels, because it's going to be a little bit different than when they communicate maybe with their peers. And so helping them, I think also, especially on communication and interaction with non-Gen Z, with other generations, because I guarantee you probably maybe their baby boomer manager or something like that will probably be a little bit taken aback if they get a text with like, are you, like the letter R, and are you available or something like that. They're gonna be, well, I thought you're gonna call me, right? Or something like that. And so establishing that kind of interpersonal sensitivity and understanding what people,
yeah,
what's appropriate in the workplace. I think sometimes that's part of that too. So I think we can't start at like there's no level where it's too basic, because at the I think
yeah,
if you think back on your first when you started out at the workplace, we didn't know any of these things. You don't learn them in school. You don't learn them in
yeah,
university. So you just have to help them kind of do these things and spell it out for them and help them find their way into it.
yeah. I do think as well yeah, I think you're so right, Kathi, and thinking about I think the question was it's about like business acumen. I think if we maybe it's that also probably the need probably changes depending on like how many Gen Z employees you have, how many you anticipate having, like where in your organization are they, what type of roles do they have. But I'm sure a combination of all of the things we've said, there's probably some really nice way of having some snappy, tech creative course about different areas of business acumen that you want to be able to focus on for your team. So as that maybe I'm sure last time we spent a lot of time thinking about the office, like there's plenty of Gen Z employees that haven't necessarily worked in an office environment before. So what does that look like? If you haven't and everything is remote now, how do we do things in a hybrid setting? Or for people who have been used to being in the office for their entire career and now don't, like how do we navigate the two of them? So, but yeah, I think you're right. You know, we can't assume that everybody is coming with the same business acumen, especially for new generations. Like we all have to learn something at some stage for the first time. So, and I think also assuming people coming into your company in general, not necessarily in their first career, but coming into your organization, it's kind of once you understand and know what you value and and care about and champion as an organization, there's a bit of level setting there, I guess. Like we've all had different experiences in our own backgrounds and professional experiences. So actually, like, what do we care about? How do we interact? What's kind of normal? What's not? I think there's definitely there's got to be a good courses for that somewhere.
I'm conscious of time.
And I think it goes back to coaching and mentoring and feedback too, right? It's not just courses.
Yeah.
I mean, I see this comment from Margarita in there that says being camera ready is a big one. And we've had that too, that somebody like a young employee, early career employee showed up to a client meeting in their bed, basically, and you could see they were lying in bed on video. I'm like, okay, that's not appropriate. So then somebody has to tell them, right, and has to say, well, this is not appropriate, and we have to do this differently. And if you're not camera ready, don't turn on the camera, or be camera ready. So that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it comes back to it's not all stuff that you can teach in courses necessarily. It also has to be in the work itself, in the flow of work.
Definitely.
Itself.
The way that you interact, how you give feedback and call out this, or how you move on from it, definitely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, I'm conscious of time. We've got 1 minute left. We're putting up a poll real quick, so be sure to take a moment to answer it. We're going to hang on for an extra minute. I've got one question, like nitty gritty, full tactic. Kathi, if you are an HR professional or an L&D professional and you're looking at 2025 and you want to start tackling this, what is just the first thing that you're doing tactically? We've talked about a lot of strategy.
I think it goes back to acknowledging that Gen Z is a great will be a very important part of your workforce, is already a great part of your workforce, and coming in with an open mind and really listening to what Gen Z needs, but then what everybody else needs, and working together with Gen Z. So I think that kind of listening and then building on what you and what your organization and where your employee and what your workforce organization needs. Probably the most important thing. It's listening is such a super skill. I'm always coming back to that.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Alex?
I think I would echo the same comments. Listen, like, people are here for start, so it's good, but get curious, ask, and I think also prepared to be challenged. Like prepared to sit with the challenge and think, what could I do differently?
Amazing. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Kathi and Alex, for your thoughtfulness and your inspiration. It was so wonderful to have all of you. And like I said, recording will be sent out, so you can always refer back to this or share it with somebody else. Have a great day. And be sure, if you want to learn more, check out highbob.com. We do have a lot of resources on there. We posted the link to the research that we've done about Gen Z, but there's tons of stuff on Gen Z, on learning, and on all other people first HR strategy.